They burned out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the July 16th Committee of the Whole meeting. We do have quite a full house here, and before I begin, I'm going to make a couple announcements. The first one is that the floor will be open to the audience for 20 minutes to address the City Council on matters that are on the agenda after the City Council discusses with staff. We ask that persons wishing to address the council keep their comments to 5 minutes in length. Comments must be addressed to the council as a whole through the mayor, and profanity will not be accepted in any form. Also, we have quite a full house regarding two particular topics, so I am going to adjust the order in which we address these, seeing as how there are children here, and that way we can get them, most of the families, out in a timely manner. So with that, what I'd like to do is start with number 3, G1 Grills and Hoods, and then move to number 5, Chickens and Rolling Meadows, and then resume with the chronological order thereafter. So, having said that, there are folks on the sign-in sheet, which we will get to after we commence, and the first order of business then is the G1 Grill and Hood, or is an electric grill without a hood okay? So this was brought up to my attention shortly after being elected and sworn in, and we had always had this ordinance since its inception, essentially. But what we never had in fine black and white writing with the ordinance was whether or not there was a mandate to have an existing restaurant convert their kitchen to obtaining and having a gas grill with a range hood. And when looking at an endeavor like that, it's roughly a $30,000 expense. So essentially what there is an opportunity to refine this ordinance for G1 to have both an A and a B. The A would be for new establishments in the city, and that would consist of allowing the specification sheet on a new build to require and mandate that the kitchen be set up in a manner that demonstrates some sort of long-term commitment to the community, and that long-term commitment is demonstrated by an investment of financial dollars, approximately $30,000. For other organizations, establishments that have been in the community for a decade plus, that have demonstrated their commitment to the community by being participants in our Chamber of Commerce, our local community events, and what have you, I believe that these sort of hoops and hurdles are not something we need to put up in front of our establishments to make it any more difficult for them to go ahead and remain competitive. I've heard from some entities that with the influx of new establishments coming in, if they were to have to invest $30,000+ just to change their kitchen structure, that would already bring them in the negative, and then trying to work back up to be competitive is just not within their business model impractical. So here we are before this with having an opportunity to make this revision where we can essentially grandfather those organizations, those restaurants, those establishments in good faith that they are not going to be here fly-by-night for a year. Is there any discussion on this?
I would say, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Is talking to some of the constituents on this, I am opposed to this as now, is that just one question, we may or may not have it tonight. I've been hearing from the people I've been talking to that $30,000 seems high for what it could be done for. So that's why I was wondering if there was an actual quote or so provided. And the second part to that is, for new entities that selected to be in Rolling Meadows, why would we have them incur $30,000? To use the example, which could be ball, that could be exactly spot. Have them incur the $30,000, which could be a deterrent for them coming to Rolling Meadows, where we would allow somebody that's existing not to incur that same cost to keep their business going. I'm all for competition. I just want to make sure it'd be a flat, level playing ground for our businesses in the community.
Yeah, and to not to combat that sentiment, but the point that I heard from the establishments was that they have demonstrated their commitment to the community. They've been here for over a decade. Whether it's $30,000 and there is a range, it could be $5,000. Right. I don't know. I don't purchase that type of equipment. But this is an opportunity where a new establishment has a blank slate where they can build to suit. Other organizations don't necessarily have the liberties and flexibility within their existing confines to meet those needs. And again, for me, it's a question of demonstrating a commitment to the community. And what I don't want to see is a new entity come in with toaster ovens, for lack of a better term, and maybe not like a cheap toaster oven, but an electric grill, right? And if things don't go the way that their business model had intended, that they're out in a year. And that's putting the city, staff, community development department resources in a lot of mindful attention when we know that current establishments that have been here for a decade are going to remain here, and as long as we support them, they will continue to support us. Any other?
Yeah.
Besessi.
Really, the only thank you, Mr. Mayor. The main comment that I've heard from constituents is that, bear with me, my throat's a little raw, is that the intent of this whole thing was that it was going to be restaurant first, the gambling second. So I think the way we need, I'm not sure if the way that, doing the $30,000 commitment and all of that is the way to get at that. I don't have a strong suggestion right now, but I really think that the whole thing is that, because otherwise what you'll have is bars in town that might serve some stuff right now, all of a sudden say, I want electronic gambling, I need it to compete. Well, too bad. It's not about the gambling. Mm-hmm. So that's really the only comment.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Alderman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. When we voted on this originally, I recall that the sentiment was that we didn't want somebody moving in and serving chips and cookies and calling it a restaurant, and that allowed them to open up a gambling establishment. And so that, yes, we wanted them to serve food, we wanted alcohol, and that we wanted them to have a well-rounded business and not just be in the business of promoting gambling and making it a gambling hall that served just the minimum amount of food in order to be passable and be able to have that service provided. So the restaurant in question is already a restaurant and a bar. So I mean, it's not a question of if they're here or if they're coming here for the sole purpose of establishing a gaming facility. They're already here in business. They're already serving food and drink to residents. So it's just about them competing with the rest of the businesses that are already providing that service. If they were coming in new, I would expect them to meet the standards because they are building a kitchen from scratch. If they're not, and they've already been serving food and serving alcohol as a rule for years, it does seem that they've met the intent of the original law, and the way it was presented and voted on was that we didn't want people who were just serving potato chips and cookies and so that they could get by, that we wanted them to actually be someplace where people could go and eat and drink, and so that's what we were trying to encourage at the time.
And I want to just clarify that we're talking about restaurants, and when we talk about restaurants, we look at Chapter 102, Taxation, Article 4, Food and Beverage Tax, Section 102-147 of our ordinances, and it says, for the purpose of this section, a restaurant shall be defined as an establishment with a wide selection of food and beverages in which customers can be served meals at their table and pay at the end of their meal. And this is what they do, and this is what they've been doing for a decade. And so they are a restaurant first.
Right, and I'm looking mainly at, it's not just the one case. Mm-hmm. It's there could be others, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, there may be merit to the current one at hand. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying that.
And this is an opportunity to look at those other cases. And again, this is about a grandfather clause. So essentially, when you read back in this portion here, it says the fiscal year 2018, the city approved of video gaming with this G1 license established, right? Now, it also states, if you read further down, that this is for any establishment that has been here since 2016 and earlier. So again, there's a wide array of potential opportunities for restaurants here, and I don't think that we need to make it any more difficult for them to get into this opportunity if they so choose. Alderman Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support this because I don't think I think it's a question of fairness. I think of the people that have come to our town recently and made the investment. I think in some ways it puts them at a competitive disadvantage for someone else to be able to serve food and not do it at the same level. I think my own personal opinion, I don't know if this is a valid one or not, is I think as gambling options become more prevalent in Illinois shortly, I think people are going to have to make sure that they have more than just video gaming as a way of income. So I would only support the current way it's set up right now with gas and a hood over it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments? Alderman Diaz.
Thank you. I have been a proponent of this from the get-go, and the whole idea was, to put businesses in Rolling Meadows at a competitive advantage and to attract new restaurants to the city using video gaming as an impetus. As I read this, I see it says establishments that have been operating in the city for a minimum of 2 years. And then it goes on to further note specialty bars, specialty grocer, liquor stores, and what I would say a VFW hall. I don't think we have a VFW hall in town. I certainly don't want liquor stores to have video gaming. The only specialty grocer that I can think of is the Amish farmer, and I don't think they would put it in there. So it looks like it's being proposed that we change this for one business, and I will not be supporting this.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we can open up.
Hold on, Mr. Mayor.
The only person I would also think, I don't think Bulldogs is applied, but I think they might also fit into this. I have no idea.
Actually, Bulldog is actually on the gaming board as approved. They have never come to the city for the G1 or the build-out.
Okay, I'm thinking that they might fit into this as well.
We scan, actually, the gaming board to see, because at one point we did hear Pepe's was thinking about it, but they have not come back to us either. But Bulldog is approved. They got all the Bulldogs pretty much approved by the gaming board, but they've never come to us about the build-out.
Okay.
And then they're approved because, Barry, as a follow-up, they're approved because they already follow in line with the original ordinance.
They are approved because they have a liquor license. They went to the gaming board saying that they are in the city of Rolling Meadows. City of Rolling Meadows allows gaming, and they were approved by the gaming board. But they are not approved by the city of Rolling Meadows at this point in time because they have not done their build-out and they have not done coming to us for a G1.
Mr. Mayor, as a follow-up for that, Mr. Krumstock, so if they were to come, they would qualify as it's currently written because they have a full operating kitchen, the hood, everything like that. That's where they would be allowed to do it. They wouldn't have to ask for any special.
The only thing that they would have to do for that G1 is do the, obviously, the room, which has the 4 foot and everything else, but they have everything else.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments from the council before I open the floor?
Mr. Mayor, I just have some questions. Perhaps it looks like we might have some subject matter experts here with us today. How many businesses have been affected by this so far? Because it sounds like Bulldog already put in the investment. So for us to make this grandfather clause for them, is that something that they missed out on? I don't understand that.
So when Bulldog took over the old Chili's and did their renovation, we did not allow gaming at that point in time. So when they did their full build-out, they did not put that separate area or anything else like that. So when you look at currently 5, the 6th one is coming online, obviously, today. But there's 6 entities in the city of Rolling Meadows that are allowed video gaming by their G1. So when Bulldog came in, they didn't have any thoughts about that. So again, if they were to come to the city and they say we'd like to go for the G1, they're going to have to build that area where the machines would actually be in.
So it's the area, but it's not the kitchen hood that's being proposed here in Part B.
They already have all that other piece. They have the kitchen hood. They're a full kitchen. So they have the hood, they have the grill, they have all the other pieces. All that they're missing is that build-out.
So my question is, I would want to know how many other businesses that this would affect, because if it's affecting multiple businesses or businesses already making the investment that are here in order to be able to qualify for the G1 license, what effect would?
So Alderman Sunoiko, to date, we have not had a single restaurant have to go through a conversion that's already been pre-existing, and then any restaurant that has built out a gas grill with a range hood was a brand new build with the opportunity to build to suit. So far, nobody to my knowledge has had that opportunity. Has not had a gas grill and a range hood already and been requested by the city to make that change.
So for clarification for people, is there anyone who is asking for the video gaming that does not comply with gas grill and hood?
Yeah, there is a restaurant and establishment.
And who is that?
I don't know if it's appropriate to discuss an open forum like this at this point. I don't know that that's...
What I would tell you is that there is one entity. They are here today, and if they want to mention that they're the entity, that's their responsibility to do. But for the city, we don't put that out until they actually, and they're actually on the signature and everything else like that. But until they come up and they actually allow us to do that, that's where we would sit.
Okay.
And so without any further question, I will open the floor for those on the sign-in sheet. The first name for this particular subject is Todd Yormark.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and City of Rolling Meadows staff. My name's Todd Yormark. Myself and my brother we're the owners of Daisy's Cafe right down the road here in downtown Meadows. So I'm here to obviously discuss this topic. Last year, when we were seeking a new location for Daisy's, we were thrilled and excited to be accepted into Rolling Meadows and the business community. Because of the grill with the hood ordinance that is currently in place, we thought our restaurant with video game business model would be a perfect fit in the city. This ordinance would also mean that our restaurant and establishment, along with everybody else, would be on a level playing field. All of us who have restaurants with video gaming have invested money, time, and we fully comply with the current city ordinance. And this should not change to protect our business and investment. So my question is, why should certain businesses not have to comply with the rules and regulations that all of us had to go through? I'm not standing up here crying poor. I strongly support new businesses in our business community as long as it's fair. Additionally, by changing this current ordinance, this might also open the doors to even more national out-of-town gaming cafe chains to potentially enter our business community. These national gaming cafes only care about the gaming and not the food. If this ordinance changes, it would not be fair for all of us who did it the right way. As a business owner, competition is good as long as it's fair, honest, and all we ask for is a level playing field. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And to clarify, it would not open the market for new establishments. This is only for businesses that have been in and established in Rolling Meadows 2 years prior to 2018. Next name on the list for this particular item is David Peterson.
Hello, I'm David Pedersen, and this is my partner Ryan Guma. We're from Bigby's Poorhouse. And first, we'd like to say thank you for taking your time to discuss this topic for us. And one of the first things that we wanted to say was that, Bigby's Poorhouse, Barry has the menu in front of him here of what we have for food. And we have always been, from the day we opened, a food and beer place, and now we have here in Rolling Meadows we have a full liquor bar, we have wine. We try to source as much as we can locally from any of our wineries, our local distilleries, but our primary source of revenue and our primary intention has always been to be a craft beer place with some creative cuisine that we have there. And whether we had Big B's in Rolling Meadows or we have Big B's in Addison or any other town, our model wouldn't change. So if we opened up in another town that allowed gaming but said, hey, we don't need to have a hood or we don't need to have a menu or whatever, our intention wouldn't change. It is what Big B's is. some of these other cafes, the ones that he was referring to earlier when he was up here, if a town required a hood, maybe they'll put a hood in. If a town doesn't require a hood, maybe they wouldn't put a hood. That's not our model. Our model is craft beer. We try to source as much as we can locally. We try to offer a creative cuisine. And it would be the same no matter where we were. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan for a minute here.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that first and foremost, we are a restaurant. We are table service, full service. We're not counter service. We never have been. The only reason we're looking to add the gaming is to augment our business. This isn't our primary focus. This is just something to add on. And one of the intentions of the gaming law when it was signed by the state of Illinois was to help existing bars that were struggling. So I know a lot of municipalities all over, and I believe Rolling Meadows included, was to help existing businesses that were struggling and bring them a little something extra to the table. So that's what we're looking for. Profit margins are razor thin. We're not looking for anything special. We're just looking to add a little gaming to our current business. And we, again, are a full-service restaurant, and I think that's about it. Oh, one of the other things would be if we had to install a hood, it's very disruptive to our business. It's possible we'd have to close down. The expense we would incur.
What you're saying about the money, yeah, it might fluctuate up to $30,000.
Sure, but that's where we look to your expertise, because that's certainly not ours.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty accurate number. Maybe 25, maybe 35.
The actual hood isn't going to cost that much, but when you get into all the other dynamics of what have to happen to your ventilation system, to the actual kitchen and all that, so it all add up. But at the end of the day, we also have the disruption of our business. Sure. and our establishment that, it would be.
So if we were coming to Rolling Meadows today, or if we were going to Schaumburg tomorrow, and we had a brand new facility, and we were building it out, that may be an option for us to put a hood in. But to take an existing place, which is already a small place, I don't know if any or many of you have been there, but there's nowhere for us to go or expand. We're in a small, narrow place, and to add or retrofit a hood in is not really practical, very expensive, very disruptive. Plus, our customers are happy with our menu. We've been around a while. We've got a full menu here. We do beer, wine, spirits, and our customers aren't looking for anything more. They're not looking for greasy cheeseburgers. They're not looking for deep fried items. They're happy with the menu we have, and we have some healthier options. We're looking to add some more healthier options.
And we like to consider ourselves not what, I forgot who mentioned it, but the chips and cookies. That's not what we're about. And I agree. I think it's terrible that they do that. And I've had the opportunity to experience working with towns at one of my other establishments that allowed the cafes to come in right away. And one of my other restaurants was in a town that didn't allow the cafes, and it was a significant difference in the overall feel for how all the gaming and everything went. So it's I realize it's a little bit of a thing here, and I don't mean to offend anybody that did have to do the way it's written and do the hood and all that, but we're.
Well, for those who don't understand this on the list, chronologically you guys are first and second in order, but because you've been tag teaming this, you have 1 minute left to finish.
Okay.
Well, that's.
I think that's it. I think you guys understand our point, and we're a business here. We've signed a 10-year lease. We're looking to stay a long time, and to have to spend that and disrupt our business and change our business model is not what we're looking to do. We're just looking to add some gaming machines in a corner of the barn. That's all. Just add to our our current business.
Mr. Mayor, can we do a follow-up?
If we can do it quickly, please, for the sake of others.
For the size of, do you have a kitchen at this point?
We do have a kitchen. It's a small kitchen. We do have. You saw the menu that they passed around.
Okay.
Yes, it'd be very difficult to retrofit a hood into our existing kitchen.
Okay.
Can you give us the extent of your kitchen and the investment that you've made so that we understand it?
Go ahead.
Coolers, freezers, ovens, work tables, slicer. We have pizza ovens, pretty much the basic stuff that we have.
So we're not, Turbo Chef toaster, nothing like that. We have multiple ovens. We're able to do up to eight pizzas at a time. Appetizers, we get fresh food delivery every week from Greco. We have fresh ingredients, spices. We have a full-time cook. We don't have a bartender that's just making sandwiches. I think that pretty much explains it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time again.
Thank you.
Next name on the sign-in sheet is Tim Yormark.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Tim Yormark, brother of Todd Yormark here, and out of respect for, I like these guys. I think they're great people. I'd like to have a beer with them, to be honest. I'm pro-business. We're new in town here, and where does it end is my question. I went to Target last night and got a George Foreman grill for $19. You could do burgers on here. You could do chicken breasts. You can do brats. Where does it end? So I understand the point of it, and I get it. This is an exaggeration, and I'm not here to insult anyone. I just think that it sets a dangerous precedent, to be honest. I think we're here in business. We've made a tremendous investment financially and time-wise, and I think it opens the floodgates potentially for other businesses to come in, large billion-dollar corporations that are just here for the gaming, providing no value to the city. So we're here to provide a value, just like Bigsby's, and I understand that and I respect that. I'm not going to go into detail about the money and the permits and the commercial hood and the fire and Ansel and the alarm and the sprinkler and on and on and on that we went through. We did it the right way and the fair way, and I think everyone should be kind of held to the same standard if that's a fair request. I understand there are exceptions to a lot of things, but sometimes it just makes sense to do it the right way. So if you have any questions for us, I am by no means an expert on the matter. We do have 3 restaurants, 3 businesses in different towns. Different towns handle it differently, but most of them all within the same level playing field. So if you have any questions for us, please let us know. My last comment would be sometimes the easy answer isn't the short-term solution. Think of the long-term effects on if there is 8 or 10 or 12 gaming cafes in town. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. And you're just slitting each other's throats, and it's not a good scenario. So I understand to redefine or possibly amend the ordinance. In my opinion, and this is just one guy's opinion, I think it's fine the way it is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And for the council, to be clear, this is for an establishment that has been operating in the city for a minimum of 2 years before the ordinance, which was approved on June 12, 2018. So it does not set any precedents for any new establishments coming in any way. This is for our pre-existing establishments that have kitchens, that have been operating as restaurants, that just may or may not have a gas grill with a range hood. This doesn't open any doors or any opportunity for any new businesses to come in. And none of our businesses have come in here and put up, and I appreciate this significant analogy for severity, 7 George Foreman grills to commercially produce food as a line order cook. So we just have to be cognizant of that. This is not opening additional exposure for new. This is just for pre-existing essablishments that have been here since 2016, essentially.
Question for staff: If this Big B's were to sell to a different entity and they purchase the existing business, so let's say a national chain as was previously described, if they were to purchase Big B's, would they be able to continue on that license and then downgrade their food service to what we're trying to avoid?
So the answer is you're using an example that did happen. Obviously, Bigsby's been in for a long time, and obviously, Better Partners purchased majority of the business, and that's why they've been able to expand the menu, some of the drinks in there. But you are correct. If someone was to come in and purchase a building, how this wording is right now, and that's what's triggering my thoughts now, they would be in an establishment, and then they would be in place that they could actually fall into that unless additional wording is put in there that the management can't change or something like that, if that's what you're trying to get to. But again, that's what would happen. Anybody who still keeps that name could still be following that section.
So I'm all for helping an existing business, but I don't want to, I'm not trying to create a situation where a new business could purchase an existing business and then gain an unfair advantage walking in fresh.
Yeah. But this wording would still allow them to do that.
I understand.
That's a fair point. And this is an opportunity to adjust any wording or any areas that need it. That's what this session and this platform is about for the council.
Question then for staff as well. Which wording specifically are you looking at for that type of a loophole in B?
Because it just says an establishment that has been operating in the city for a minimum of 2 years before the ordinance and is good standing with the city since 2017. So again, that wording right off the bat. So the establishment, XYZ in place, has been operating. Someone comes in, buys XYZ, they've been in good standing. They would be following that they could do whatever they wanted at that point.
And then follow up for Alderman Bud Matz. With your line of thinking, if someone came in, then are you saying that if it's still Big B's Poorhouse, and then someone decides that they no longer want to provide such a varied menu and it just becomes essentially a gambling den? Is that okay?
I'm looking to avoid.
Yeah.
The question is, does the liquor license transfer, or because isn't this tied to the liquor license?
So liquor licenses are tied to the business. So if they set up an LLC, that would also trigger another thing. However, if they bought the business and they kept, let's say XYZ has XYC LLC, and they buy that out and they keep that, then we would not know the difference.
Is there a way that we can kick this back, have it rewritten, and then get to vote on it in a way that might be more palatable? I don't want to rewrite this in a way that has a loophole. If we're trying to avoid, we're trying to help an existing business, but we don't want to make an unfair advantage for anybody new coming through, and we're not trying to create, as you said, gambling halls.
Yeah, so we should allow our legal counsel to adjust any verbiage that would take any ambiguity out of the equation. Alderman Diaz, did you say something?
Nothing. I was actually looking at B and just supporting his comments regarding the specialty grocers, liquor stores, things like that being included. I think if we rewrite that, that should be taken out.
So your suggestion should be noted.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing. Staff, do you have note of that?
Yep.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions for this?
For clarification, Alderman Bassesi, is your suggestion then to eliminate every part of the wording except for established restaurants?
Not necessarily. Well, seeing as we have this is pertaining, as the mayor clearly stated several times, to businesses that were here at least 2 years prior to the ordinance. We don't have any veterans gathering halls. So, really the only one it would apply to would be liquor stores, specialty grocer, which I agree Amish probably wouldn't want to do that. But then there are specialty bars. So it's basically saying, I want this ordinance, what I would prefer, what I think the people I've talked to would prefer, is that we just make sure that we don't lose the intent of the restaurant first. That's the bottom line.
Alderman Bassesi, what are your thoughts on providing a definition for establishment as opposed to the examples in B? To say an establishment is, and then referencing other areas of the Rolling Meadows City Code that defines a restaurant.
So, Alderman Sinwaka, I did do that when I referenced the restaurant tax incentive, which was something that was brought up recently. And for the purpose of this section, a restaurant shall be defined as an establishment with a wide selection of food and beverages in which customers can be served meals and they're at their table and pay at the end of their meal. And that's already in our ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Clear definition.
And bringing that up again for this, since perhaps the parentheses at the end of B is where some of the confusion is coming into play.
And so this definition was developed by our hands when we developed the restaurant tax incentive. And so we can go ahead and amend both then if it makes sense, because we should keep things consistent when we're trying to keep definitions in play. We need to keep them consistent across the board. Alderman Diastis.
Thank you. So, an establishment. Let me think here. Meridian is an establishment. They have a liquor license. So they could open up a place and not have to put a hood in.
Open up when? Before 2016?
No, they're established. Mm-hmm. They meet the criteria.
They do have a hood and grill.
But could they open up another place? They are an established business in the city. So why couldn't they do another place?
Geographically, it doesn't fit in the same.
Doesn't say that. What we're voting on tonight, what we're discussing tonight is, does the council want to have an A and a B? It's not, the conversation here now is going in 6 different directions. I don't think we have a specialty grocery store that has a liquor license. I don't think we have we have liquor stores, but they don't serve food, so they could do the chips and cookies and salsa, and that would work based on this. And we don't have a VFW hall, so I am opposed to changing an ordinance for the sake of one business.
Help me understand where you infer that they could do chips and cookies and salsa.
Well, where does it say that they have to have, where does it say in Part B that they have to have food?
This is something that it's not about the menu.
This is about wanting to change the law for one company, for one business, and I'm opposed to that. I don't think it's fair. Pardon me, sir. I don't think it's fair to Daisy's and any of the other businesses that we have. I'm in the hotel and restaurant business, and most restaurants, full-service restaurants, have a kitchen, and they have a hood. It's kind of a legal requirement. Now, the Bixby's folks, they do a pizza. I don't know what kind of pizza oven they have, and I don't know if they have a hood over that. And they obviously don't do any fried foods. I get that. They do some grilled sandwiches. I get that. They serve food. But in terms of a full-service restaurant, and I'm not going to say that, I am going to say they're not a full-service restaurant. Okay, so this is changing the ordinance for one company, and I don't think that's fair to all the other companies in the city.
Manager Krumstock, to be clear, the gas grill and a hood are not in the ordinance to date.
No.
So we're not changing anything because it's not there in an ordinance. It's a recommendation which the prior mayors had either signed off on or they didn't.
So if it's not part of the ordinance, why are we voting on this? And then why don't we just give them their gaming license?
Because, again, at this point in time, how the ordinance states is it says at least one grill, and the understanding was, and again, it goes back to past mayor and everything else, if it did not have that hood, they would not get even the approval to get the G1 to you.
But hood wasn't in there, so I mean, why?
It was the understing, and that's
the mayor's discretion.
Right.
Now I'm very nervous because I see that we have legal, we might have an opening to be sued because we're not following our own ordinance, because if it doesn't require them to have a hood and we're holding back their license, I'm very nervous about this. I'd like to get this rewritten. I'd like to table it and come back to this.
We can table and we can take out the establishment, but again, any liquor license is not a guarantee, and it's actually, that's why there is again, when this was looked at by legal and some of the other pieces. So again, we can rewrite it. We can take out the word establishments and restaurants and put the definitions, and we can bring it back. Obviously, the firm sitting in back, they've waited through one mayor, and they waited now. Hopefully, you can wait if we have more discussion. But at the same point in time, we can clean up some of those things. But again, it's a privilege, any liquor license. So again, that goes back into the signatures and anything that's brought before the city council.
Okay, so we'll table this for the time being.
I have a comment, sir.
I think we're tabling it. What's your
I have a
final
comment, sir.
comment?
My comment is, if we're running scared, as Mr. Budman said, about possible lawsuits, then I think the people at Daisy's can also sue the city, because if it wasn't in there and we forced them to do it, they can have a lawsuit against us just as easily as the other company can.
I can't speak on behalf of that.
I know you can't, and so I am not in favor of tabling it. I'm in favor of taking a vote, and I do not want to change this.
But
it's not fair to the company.
The vote this evening is irrelevant at a forum, a roundtable forum.
Well, you have to take a vote on whether we move this ahead or not.
Mm-hmm. But even still, it leaves a lot of community exposure if we don't do anything at this point.
You have to take a vote on whether we want to move it ahead or not.
And if we don't move it ahead, we still have leftover actions remaining to do anyway. That's all I'm trying to say. So with the vote, would the council like to see this move forward?
I made a motion to table this. Could we please table it, or at least vote on tabling it?
Seconded.
Okay. Then let me see a quick show of hands to table this for this evening. All those in favor? It's 2 in favor. Those opposed? Okay. So then with a quick show of hands, I want to see a vote to proceed this up to the council level. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay.
So keep in mind, we voted not to bring this to council, but there's nothing in our current ordinance that requires them to have a hood.
That is correct. And as such, the mayor can approve it.
No, the mayor cannot approve it. The council has to approve it.
You can approve it to the ordinance for the G1 before the city council.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I can move it forward.
Yep.
Okay, so moving forward, as I said, we're going to go ahead and skip around a little bit just for the sake of time and consistency to go ahead and move folks in and out of here. And the next item that we're going to have here is going to be line item number 5. And for this, I'll defer to Alderman Sonoyka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So originally, Alderman Budmatz had brought forth an ordinance to permit backyard chickens in the city of Rolling Meadows.
Banger.
Banger. What did I say, banger?
Budmatz.
Budmatz. I'm so sorry.
It's good.
Alderman Banger in May of 2018. And there were some concerns that had been brought up as a result of that ordinance proposal. And so if you look on the packet in page 7 of 19, there's a background that describes some of those concerns, principally the possible increased predators as a result of having backyard chickens. The second concern was diverting police and building inspector time to enforcing coop requirements. And the third major concern during those discussions were increased cleanliness and nuisance calls. In response of the 2-5 defeat of Alderman Banger's ordinance, many residents within the city of Rolling Meadows, at this point approximately 80, and joined up together to conduct additional research in neighboring communities. These communities included St. Charles, I'm looking at Exhibit C of your packet, 11 out of 19, Bartlett, Evanston, Berwyn, Oak Park, St. Charles, and Bensonville. And then there is a summary of some of their backyard chicken programs and whether or not some of those concerns were in fact visible for those particular programs. With regards to any noted problems, there were none across the board. You'll notice in your packet in Bensonville there was a mention of someone had a rooster by mistake, but they corrected that issue on their own. There was no increase in complaints due to birds or predators. And as far as suggested changes to their program, since they had already done this, essentially the question had been asked if you had any changes in the works in order to improve their programs. Bartlett, Evanston, St. Charles had none. Bensonville considered perhaps being more comprehensive, but they had no concrete plans to do so. Berwyn and Oak Park had considered some changes with regards to where coops could be due to the Chicago-style lots. Rolling Meadows does not have Chicago-style lots, so that is perhaps I would consider a moot point. So we also have... So what I have presented here for us tonight are several different directions that we could go. In order to address the concern that city resources would be directed towards enforcing this particular ordinance change, I have option 1 presented before you on page 6 of your packet. Option 1, the only thing that does is it changes the prohibition of foul, and it changes that to redefining or taking out the word foul and just saying that no person shall own or keep any goats, sheep, hogs, cattle, turkeys, geese, or ducks. And then there's an added sentence that says that domesticated house pets are allowed in backyard chickens, and then further defines backyard chickens to refer to no more than 6 egg-laying hens and prohibits roosters. You'll see option 2 is not only amends the section 14.2 of the original ordinance in our code, but then also provides a significant amount of guidance. And that is presented in Exhibit A. Exhibit A is very similar to the original ordinance that was proposed, which I have included here as Exhibit B. There are a couple of main differences. The main differences are taking out some of the permitting requirements, but for the most part they are quite similar. And I provided them both here today because we have, I think, a number of people willing to speak on this subject and a couple of subject matter experts as well that will be able to provide guidance on how much we should include or how many different types of regulations need to be included in the ordinance. I do want to say that the option 1, if we were to go forward with that, that's essentially treating the chicken or backyard chickens, backyard hens, similar to our current pets. So things like noise ordinances, animal cruelty, or requirements for what types of structures you can build on your property are already covered under other ordinances that we have in our code. So that's why that option is there.
Is that it for the presentation portion?
At this point, yes.
Okay. So with the finality of that, are there any questions or comments or discussion at this time from the council? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Snow got a great job on all the research and the details there. I did hear from a total of 49 residents overall, 37 from the 3rd Ward, and there was a clear support for this, but there was a couple of items they did ask for those that were in support. There were some that were concerned around the predatory animals. It was more informational and educational purposes. Is that a couple of the points that those in favor did was wondering if the city could be able to incorporate if the ordinance were to move forward is about a tracking. Not necessarily not a revenue stream to the association by any means, but just that we have some type of notice of how many chickens are in. Are there 5 residents interested in doing it? Is it 55? Do they each have 3? Do they have 6? The other one also was about a lot line, if that could be moved further or off of the rear lot line. Is that in case it's not because somebody else patio deck, something like that? And I thought that was a valid point, is maybe it's off the rear yard line or property line instead of the side one. And then the other one was around the coop, is if they do invest the money, because it's my understanding it's significant money, doing some research and
yes.
As well on this, and so it is definitely a financial investment, is if the resident were to move, that they would remove the coop upon their sale of the property or rental of the property. And that's another question. Is it only for rental ownership, or would it be allowed for rental properties as well? That's probably more of a landlord thing, so I don't know that we would have any jurisdiction on that. Or if after whatever time frame, and I'm open to this, after 3 months, if they have a coop, but they say, hey, after 3 months this is way more work than I was experiencing, or 6 months, if it sits vacant and they don't have chickens any longer for X number of days or months, whatever the city might like to do, is that it would have to also be removed. It couldn't just be sitting there not used as a chicken coop.
Can I just clarify some questions or comments that have been saying? So go back to the B ordinance that we do have. Mm-hmm. There is an annual fee, so we do know where the 5 registered are. So we are ready to do that. So if you're going to do that, that's the only thing that we would have for tracking.
Okay.
We call it registration, not tracking. I'm not tagging chickens. But again, there's an annual fee, and they do provide how many aviaries they actually have, and then those things. So not everybody has the 2 that's allowed in the maximum. There's actually one that just has 1.
Okay.
So we do track that already with the bees. So
that is a good type of precedent, per se.
Yeah, and the fee for the bee permit annual is $10, so it's nominal. It's just making sure that we know who it is. And going back to inspections, I do not inspect bees. What I do is drive by each of the homes that are registered and make sure that they have, obviously, what we're asking for, the sign or any of the other pieces. Sometimes I can actually see where the aviaries are, so I can see some of the dispatch. It is correct. Obviously, in both ordinances, you would still have to go through the Illinois Department of
Agriculture.
all those kind of things. For the bees, we do not. So just making the other point, and the comment that I just want to clarify, I think you're referring to D in the proposed ordinance about all enclosure structures should be located a minimum of 5 feet from all lot lines. I think you just said rear.
That was an idea that it was just one resident that had the idea, is could it be off of the rear property line versus just any lot line?
I'm just asking as I go.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Just to clarify, are we referring to Exhibit A for the new ordinance proposal draft?
That's what I just was reading through.
Okay, because in A, we actually do not include the registration with the United States Department of Agriculture to avoid commercializing the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comments, discussion items? Alderman Budmats?
So I have been contacted by a number of residents about this as well. In my own ward, it is not running pro-chicken, it's running actually anti-chicken. And a couple of comments that were brought up is that there was some concern about chicken waste that can carry salmonella, and what if somebody sells this house, the next people come in, they move in, and they put a playground for their kids right where the chicken coop is, and how do we remediate whatever disease would have been there as a result of the chicken droppings, which apparently can contain salmonella. So that was one concern that one resident brought up. And then another resident said, I really don't want this 5 feet away from me. It could be, I can't even have a shed 5 feet away. It would have to be 10 feet based on where our lot line is. And so I would strongly urge us to consider a larger amount of space between chicken coops and neighbors, given the fact that what I've read is that the chickens do require some space to be able to roam, etc. And if I didn't have a fence between myself and my neighbor, I don't know that I would necessarily want to have their chickens walking into my yard. So those were the things that came up from my residents in their discussions on this.
Thank you, Alderman Budmats. Salmonella campylobacter is the term that it's called, lasts 1 to 4 hours on hard and fabric surfaces, just for clarification. Alderman Diastis.
Thank you. The emails I received, not from people in my ward, were 9 opposed and 7 in favor. The commentary that I received, the communications I received from people in my ward, were 10 opposed and 3 in favor. Items that they brought up was where did 8,000 come from? Why not a quarter acre, which is 10,890 square feet? Minimum should be a fifth of an acre, which is 8,713 feet. I also heard 5 feet from the lot line is absolutely not acceptable. Most of the people said 15 feet. Most said there should be some kind of permitting and inspection done to make sure that the coops are being taken care of. And I guess, the item that Ms. Sonoyka did is not good enough, I don't think. I did some study, and it said the minimum size requirement of a coop is 3 foot per chicken. So if you have 6 chicken, you need an 18 square foot coop. So I believe that we should standardize that and say, if you're going to have a coop, make it 20 square feet. It's 5 by 4. It's real easy to measure that. You know if it's if it works. The information I read also said that you need 10 feet per chicken outside of the coop. So if you have 6 chickens, that's 60 more feet. So you need to have 80 square feet of space dedicated towards chickens, and it should be all fenced off. I think the biggest thing I heard was neighbors and community. And I heard, we're sitting at a farm. But neighbors and community kind of really struck to me. And I thought to myself, how could we do this so that if I want to do this coop, that I don't alienate my neighbors, people I may have been friends with for 20 years, now all of a sudden become I think I'm antagonistic towards them. Or my dog is bothering their chickens, so they're not laying eggs, and now we have a fight. So my suggestion to that, and I asked a couple of people what they thought. I said, if an individual would like to have a coop, and they apply to a permit, then the city, part of our responsibility to be good neighbors, is to send an anonymous letter to all the neighbors whose property abut the permit requester. And the question could be something simple as, one of your neighbors would like to build a chicken coop in their backyard. Do you approve? Yes or no? If all the neighbors approve, then there shouldn't be any arguments. Nobody will be mad at each other. But if somebody feels that they can say no anonymously, and then the neighbors don't fight. So I think that absolutely has to be a part of this, that the city, we take it upon ourselves to find out, do the neighbors want this? And you give them a time frame. And if they don't respond, the answer is yes. You take it in the affirmative. If they don't want it, then they have to say no. And the neighbor who wants the coop doesn't know who to be mad at because he's got 3 or 4 or 5 neighbors. And the ones who really don't want it don't have to be offended, take a chance to offend the person who wants the coop. But it's about neighbors and community. And this could really make some people very upset. A letter says yes or no. But the other items, I think, that have already been brought up need to be addressed, and I think we need to look at some of the things that from the original one. The square, it says here, item D of the original one said 6 square feet per chicken. Well, I read 3, but it did say 10 square feet per chicken to run around. Either way, you need about 80 square feet to do this, and it has to be fenced in so that they're not escaping from their unfenced yard into my yard, and my dog ends up chewing on it. So, those are my comments.
Alderman Diastis, thank you for your comments. It's clear that you've thought a lot about this. With regards to an anonymous letter.
I'm sorry, but I think it's inappropriate for one alderman to talk to another one. Isn't it go through the mayor first and see if anybody else has comments?
Of course. She had signaled that she was going to speak, and I allowed her to do that, and she can continue. If you'd like to address it through me, that's fine. This is an open forum.
Okay. To everybody, Mr. Diastis, thank you again for researching the space for the chickens. I will address that first. With regards to the 8,000-foot determination, that was determined when Alderman Banger originally created the ordinance in May of 2018. Together with our legal counsel, that was determined as the size of the lot. of a typical home in Rolling Meadows. So that's where the 8,000 came from. As far as the space per chicken, that is also included, similar to what you were saying, to give chickens enough space to be able to move around. Through research since May 2018, so over a year, many subject matter experts said that that was unnecessary. So we'll have some individuals speaking about that tonight, I'm sure, to help clarify. So hopefully you can ask more questions about how much space is required for backyard chickens if you have 3 versus 6.
I said 3 was fine.
As far as spacing is concerned, with regards to your idea about requesting permission from neighbors, I think that that's very considerate. As a city, I feel that the purpose of having an ordinance is so that we eliminate a case-by-case basis, and so that those that do want to have chickens, there are guidelines in place. And there are also then methods for those who are not happy with chickens because of things like smell or cleanliness, to then have a method for enforcement. So.
Thank you, Alderman Sunoika. Is there any further discussion? Alderman Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a few more than 20 emails today from all over the place. I can't really say it was helpful to me because they were all over the place. They were, I would say, almost half and half each way. Some of the people were extremely forceful that they don't want them. We're in a city. We're a city suburb, not a rural suburb. I'm not saying that's just their thoughts. A couple of comments that I would just make is the 5-foot setback is really concerning to me because that's really close to your neighbor. So I think that's something that we need to address. We definitely need fences in the backyard if they can roam outside the cages at all. It sounds like we got that covered too. Ms. Noik, I think you did a great job giving us a lot of information. My concern when we talked about this before, on a couple years ago, was I just don't want it to become a burden for the city. So whatever we can do to make it as least burdensome as possible. I know the police department wants nothing to do with this because they have plenty of other things to do. I don't want our building department to have to get really involved with a lot of these things. I guess one of the questions I would ask you, do you have any feel for how many people might do this right at the beginning? I know it's a general question. I don't know if you have a feel for it or not.
Right. So for the past, more than a year, speaking with those who are very passionate about this, I would say probably less than 10 families.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I would just offer is maybe a compromise, is maybe we could consider approving this on a temporary basis through like the end of next year. Just as a thought. I don't know if people would think that's a good idea or a bad idea, but as opposed to making it a permanent law forever, say, hey, let's give it a trial from now to the end of next year, see how it runs, and if it's problem-free like a lot of other cities have experienced, no problem. I don't know if that's a reasonable solution or not.
Sure. So my thoughts on a temporary program would be that because this is such a significant investment for those that are doing this right, that and because we've missed the season for raising chickens for those that want the pullets or the baby chicks for their families to then raise, and then the chickens living longer, I feel that giving some permanence for the welfare of the animals is important. So that way the incentive to actually invest and invest correctly is there. So that said, Bartlett is a temporary program. They were a program that started off to see, was this going to work out? It did end up working out. So because we have these comparable communities that support this, to not necessarily be an issue. My goal is to kind of skip that step if we can.
And just, I believe, I've talked to a number of people who want to do this, and I think that they're really, they have great intentions, and I think they'll probably do a good job. I'm not worried about the people who already have good intentions. I'm worried about someone who says, out of the clear blue, my 2 little kids, let's get a couple chickens, and they're really not prepared for it. I guess I'm worried about the off people that are not really committed to this. I think some of the people have come forward. I'm sure a lot of the people you have in your group are really committed to this and will do a wonderful job with them. So, I think if the program was successful next year, it would be easy to continue it because I'm not perceiving any problems. And I hope there would not be any if we approve it. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Alderman Cannon, do you believe that you could help us come up with some sort of metric to determine the success or failure of the program? So
It'd be very simple, Mr. Mayor, just what kind of complaints we're getting.
Just a matter of complaints?
I don't know how else we measure it.
I'm not sure. But I would hate for those who are doing well to be penalized and then have to take a living creature and probably have to have it dispatched. And,
Again, Mr. Mayor, and I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. I'm not out to make it hard.
Sure.
I'm just saying, since a lot of us are kind of on the fence, I'm not speaking for anybody else but myself. I'm not really against it. I just don't know if I'm really for it either, and I'm just thinking maybe this would be a reasonable solution. I don't want anybody to kill their animal over this thing. Right. But I think if it goes the way you're presenting it, and you've been really fair with your presentation, I don't think it'll be a no-brainer next year. It's just an opinion.
No, I agree. So I too sit in your camp. I'm indifferent. I know I will not purchase chickens. I think it's a great idea for those who have the discipline and the financial capacity to do it and desire to do it. I know that some of the opposition that we've been dealing with for this, and I've gotten plenty in my inbox as well, have been purely emotionally driven and not necessarily statistical or objectively driven, and fears about odor or increased predation. So we have more predation based on the amount of garbage we put on the side of our road than we do from the livestock if we were to have 1 or 2 chickens or an additional household cat. As far as the odor goes, unfortunately, I know some people who can't go out in their backyard because their neighbors have dogs they don't pick up the feces after, and the smell of fermenting fecal matter goes into their backyard. And so as far as smell goes, you'll get that from anything but chicken's feces is not that comparable to a dog's, for example. But all of these fears or these trepidations, it can be made the same argument for any other livestock family pet that we already have in our homes today.
Alderman Cannon, the original ordinance that is presented in Exhibit B included the licensing and tracking that Alderman O'Brien and City Manager Comstock have brought up. So what we could do is we could put a limit. So in order to be able to have the benefits of a pilot program where we have some select families, we could perhaps then change our ordinance to include licensing limits. So in the original, the license limit was set at 25. If you want, we could set it at 10 and then at a year's time revisit and then increase that to something higher. Or if the demand is there, we could perhaps revisit that sooner and then increase the licensing.
I have no problem with that. I guess the only question I would ask, what happens if 14 people say they want to get in it right away?
And then we have 10?
Yeah.
Perhaps we could do a lottery.
Okay.
And then after a year's time, if there's no problem with the lottery, then, or if we wanted to do a judgment program, this might take some staff time if we were to do that 10. Or if, like you said, if there's 14, then maybe 25 is a better number to start with. From the individuals that I've talked to, it seems like it's about 10 families, but I can come back and then we can adjust that for a future date.
That's fine.
Okay.
Alderman Bunmax?
One nice comment, and this I just remembered. One other person brought up something, and I'm assuming there are still some houses that are on wells in Rolling Meadows, not in the center of town, but does this affect groundwater?
So not being the professional doctor on this, no, it shouldn't, because the cleanup and everything else like that. And you are correct. It's some sections out west that we have, but
Out west.
But again, majority is on our city water. So again, City of Chicago water that's generated. So again, I do want to remind one thing. This is an ordinance. So again, first reading could have 10, and then depending on what feedback you get, you could always change that too. And the only other comment is, if we're doing it for a pilot, could we do it for at least 2 years? Because you do need some feedback.
More statistical analysis to pursue. Sure. Alderman Bessetti.
I was listening. I think almost every comment that I've gotten on the emails has been covered. The only ones that I didn't hear were the what about wintertime? Where do chickens go when it gets 20 below? I didn't mean to rhyme there. But. Are they coops insulated?
So if you look at
your bedroom, I don't know.
Mayor and City Council, obviously, in the first ordinance, the last one, it actually addressed that about blankets and some of
Yeah,
the
I saw
insulation. So typically they stay in their homes at that point in time. I do know that certain people in the past have brought them into their physical homes and then put them in, but typically once you're buying this investment, they're going to have the insulated coops. They're going to have the other things. And going back to, I think Mayor Gallo said, or maybe Alderman Cannon, this is an investment. So people are not going to be making the grates where you got the chick just living in a grate. But again, for winter, they are winterized majority. And that's why the other ordinance talked about blankets and insulation.
There was that comment. The other ones, like I said, most of them have all been covered. Generally, the comments, both via email or people just stopping me, it's about 50-50, maybe leaning a little bit towards in favor of the ordinance. There was one other concern regarding what's the impact to the property values. Would there be an impact to property values? I don't know. It's just like, there's so many different things that could impact the property value. So I don't know if that's even a relevant thing, but if somebody could address that when they're talking. And then lastly, there was a comment about, what was it? The winter. Disposal of the chickens.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to some of these.
Okay.
I'll go backwards, starting with the disposal, the disposal of chickens, and also roosters. If you're buying pullets, the little baby chickens, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you have all hens. And so there are chicken rescues within the Chicagoland area where you can say, I have a rooster, and then they will take care of the rooster somewhere else where you can have roosters. We have a family that's here today that says they'll take all roosters and to their home in Kentucky. So that farm down south, but a real one. So
I don't think anybody here will have a problem with the roosters.
Noisy drive.
Yeah. And then you had another question about property values. So this was not an original consideration or direct consideration from the previous discussions in May of 2018. Mm-hmm. So that was not fully researched, but we can do that for you. I do want to mention that there are communities that are highly regarded, such as St. Charles and Glenview, that have chickens and chicken programs. So
it's just some thought that I got from someone. So it's just.
But I agree with you that would be data we'd have to come and circle back on so that you can see the trends right after chicken programs, or for those that have had chicken programs for multiple years. So that way you're comparing apples to apples. Mm-hmm. And you had two concerns, but I feel like you had a third. What was the third?
The winter, right?
And the winter, which Mr.
Comstock said was an option B or whatever, the original ordinance was covered.
There are some varieties of chickens as well that are just hardier, similar to how you would not put your Chihuahua out to go to the bathroom without a sweater, but your Husky loves that weather because they have that extra fur. Mm-hmm. Chickens as well, some of them prefer colder climates as well, so it depends on the breed of the chicken.
Any further comment before I open the floor up for those who signed it? Seeing none, then I'm going to call up the first speaker on this item, and that is Patricia Callahan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, I'm up here to basically tell a story from my mom, who's 83 years old. She grew up in downtown Arlington Heights. She was born in 1935, and she lived in the downtown area. And back in those days, they had chickens in an established downtown community, house side by side, backyard to backyard, and they had chickens. And they had maybe anywhere from 4 to 8 chickens at a time. And homes after homes, side by side, they all had chickens. And this was, They didn't have problems. This is back when Rolling Meadows was fields and farmland, and they had the coyotes and the foxes. They didn't have problems with predators coming out to the coop, and the chickens are gone. And that's so. I just wanted to share that story. They had chickens in Arlington Heights up until she said that they had them after World War II, but not the time when she started high school, which was in 1949. She said a new mayor came to town, and he was trying to keep up with a town further down the tracks. She thinks it was Park Ridge, so no more chickens. So they had to go ahead and get rid of all their chickens. So, and also too, in response to Mayor Diastis's comment about sending out a letter, that's a very wonderful sentiment and very courteous to your neighbors. But you don't do that when you're in a neighborhood and you get a new dog, thinking this cute little puppy is going to be mild mannered and have a wonderful disposition, and then every time you open up the door and you let him out, and he's a barker and barks and barks and barks and barks. And that happens in communities. Dogs bark and they become a nuisance. And chickens really don't make that much noise. And my daughter has chickens, and they have approximately anywhere from 30 to 40 at any given time, and you pull up to the property of her in-laws where the chickens are, and you don't even know that there's chickens there. And they're free range. They've got a wide open area that they walk around in and everything, and you don't even know that there's chickens on the property. And so I just wanted to share that story about the time when Arlington Heights did have chickens in the downtown home area when it was established community, down there. So, and I do live in a condo, and I cannot have chickens on my property. I don't think my condo association would appreciate me having a coop on my balcony, though I do appreciate fresh eggs and that, but I do support the residents having chickens because we are at a time when food is so processed, and people are going back to a time where it is farm to table. They got gardens, and it is nice to have fresh eggs, so I do support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next signature on the sign-in list is Lauren Gallucci.
Hi, thank you guys for having me again. I have the answers to, I think, all of the questions and things that came up. I'd hate for it to cut into my 5 minutes, but I do talk fast when I'm nervous. So I'm just going to fly through the answers and then get down to what I'd really like to say. A lot of the answers are included in either the double-sided chicken flyer for anybody who'd like one. We kind of addressed it on the backside, and also in the information from the cities that we presented. So just really quickly, some background. I attended the city council meeting last year. I met many of you there, spoke to you there. I appreciate your time. I know you guys have been bogged down with emails and feedback, and I really do appreciate the time you've put into this issue for those of us who are interested in it. Emails especially. So after that last city council meeting, we had two people speak up about chickens, both in favor and 0 against. Clearly, based on what I'm seeing on the social media platform the last couple of days, people are very passionate about this issue, and I don't think we'd be discussing it for a third time if we didn't have people who were that interested in it. A lot of people waited until 3 days before the meeting to become passionate about it, which is frustrating because it hasn't really given me time to give them the feedback. But you guys have the information, which is great. And I just want to address the few things. Starting with, well, you already addressed salmonella, so I appreciate that. Reptiles as pets also can carry salmonella. I've had a ball python for 5 years. I've not yet caught salmonella. So it is manageable in the sense of as long as you're washing hands, you really should be okay. I'm aware of where the residents got that information. I've read the U.S. Department of Agriculture reports on these outbreaks of salmonella. And the people who are named in those outbreaks are people who are directly handling their animals and not washing their hands. So a risk, yes, but one that could be mitigated pretty easily. So that's salmonella. And you already addressed the lot size question. We talked about a pilot program last year, and the council had decided it was not necessary. I don't actually think anybody has a problem with the pilot program, but that's why it was removed. It's because at last May's discussion, it was discussed, and I'd have to go back, of course, and see the minutes from the meeting, but the council actually said, well, that doesn't seem necessary. So that's why it was removed. I don't think anybody who's interested in chickens would be opposed to a pilot program, because I personally feel that it would almost definitely continue after that based on what I've seen in the data. So, if that's something that would help the process, by all means, I think it's an option. Tracking chickens. That was something that we removed, and again, is not a problem to put back in. It was also discussed last year, and the question was, where did we come up with this number? It was an arbitrary number. It was decided just, for some buy-in. And again, I got the impression from the council that nobody felt it was necessary. I actually do think that tracking I'm willing to pay for a license, but I don't necessarily think that even the council last year felt that was necessary. But for tracking purposes, I think it's a great idea to know who has them, mostly because it allows the group of residents who are interested to provide support to people should they want or need it. So it's actually really helpful for those of us who have been in this chicken group, which has an official name, Rolling Meadows Citizens for Chickens. So, but we've been active for almost a year, and we've definitely discussed being both self-policing, first of all, which will decrease your need for resources from the city, because that is something that Alderman Cannon had represented to me at the last meeting, and it's something that I kept in mind. So we talked about this group being sort of self-policing, and we're not an official anything that can do anything, but we can provide support to residents who are interested and may not have the knowledge base or have unanswered questions. So in any role that can be done, you have, as of today, 103 members of a Facebook group that are interested in chickens in Rolling Meadows, who are all sort of willing to be that resource. So tracking chickens, great. Not tracking chickens, but registering chickens is not something that I think anybody's opposed to. As far as neighbors, from what I can tell, neighbors don't actually want anything in Rolling Meadows. They don't want a new fire station. They don't want stuff on Dominic's. They don't want construction on Kirchhoff, but they don't want potholes. There's really no way, in some ways, you're going to win everybody over. And I know that. I'm going into that knowing that. I actually only have one neighbor who I've already spoken to casually and said, oh, that sounds great. I would be interested in that. So it is possible, of course, to get your neighbor's consent. It is also, I think, not really fair. You're starting people behind. You're handicapping them from the start in some ways. You're not allowing them to prove the positives, and you have no faith in them, essentially, which is disappointing. And I have noticed a lack of faith in each other on the social media platform as well. So that one I don't necessarily agree with. I think, and also if it's my property and I can build a shed on it without asking you, and I can build a gazebo on it, which was referenced as one of the reasons that somebody didn't want a chicken coop. I built a gazebo. And I don't want a chicken coop next door. Did you ask your neighbors if they liked your gazebo? No, of course. I can build a dog house, and I don't need your permission. And at some point, there has to be a line that neighbors just cannot cross, right? Like, you have your property, I have mine. I don't infringe upon you. I don't disturb you. Therefore, just kindly let me just manage my property in a responsible way. So there's that. Disposal of birds. We do have the Ruckers who own a farm and are willing to take accidental roosters and or for whatever reason. People flunk out of the program and decide they just don't have what it takes. We have options to rehome those chickens. That being said, I threw away a chicken carcass last night in the garbage after my family ate a rotisserie chicken. So we're not talking about anything out of the realm of what goes into. I want to know what people do with their guinea pigs when they die. What do they do with their pet mice? It's your personal comfort level, of course. But my answer to that question would be that there are appropriate ways to dispose of a chicken, but many that are not. There really aren't any problematic ways that I'm envisioning of disposing of a chicken, aside from putting it out before garbage day. Don't do that. And please don't do that with your garbage either, for that matter. There are many cold hardy breeds, and this group could recommend certainly
I'm going
breeds.
to ask you to wrap up soon.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I've just basically tackled all your questions. Please take a look at this. It does address noise levels. It addresses property values. All of the towns in the 10 most competitive housing markets on the Forbes list allow backyard chickens. I'm going to assume it doesn't hurt property values. Every single town we talk to, we ask specifically, have you had an increase in predators? No, zero, none. 0% have said yes. We asked, have you had an increase in nuisance calls? Has anybody been chasing chickens? Has your police department had to get involved? The answer was zero, no, across the board. Would you make any changes? No, zero, across the board. So while I know there are vocal anti-chicken people out there, and their numbers might rival those who are interested, I would argue that there is no information to back up. And in fact, we're discussing the same concerns we discussed a year ago. With the information here, people fall back on those same concerns. And there's just nothing to back them up. There's nothing to support it at all. And we're not talking about velociraptors. We're talking about 5-pound birds that make less waste than your dog, make up less than a dog if you put them all together. So I would ask that they get the same shake that your dog, for example, would get. We don't ask for permission to build a dog house. We don't have to license our dogs. Somebody actually recommended microchipping all of the chickens. I'm not required to microchip my dog. I do because I want them to come back to me should anything happen. But to suggest that we impose extra restrictions on a chicken that are just so far above and beyond what's really required. So you're asking people just to have common sense, to be responsible neighbors, and I think you have a group of people certainly who are interested and willing to do that. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. And then the last signatory on the list is Carol Alon.
Good evening. I just wanted to make a quick note that I'd love for you to consider yes for my neighbors to have chickens. I found the research done by the Rolling Meadows Citizens for Chicken excellent and really falls in line with the Rolling Meadows and their founders' goal of progress through participation. I did my own research and really couldn't find anything that could affect me negatively as a neighbor. Here are some negative things that I did find. Chickens can be expensive. The average chicken will cost someone about $3 to $5. There's additional expenses to keep the chicken, the coop. The good news is those handy with tools and scrap wood could pretty much build a very good coop with minimum cost, as 3 of my friends have done. Size restrictions could be considered, especially if the coop is to be stacked coop, which then you'd have to accommodate the required size per chicken, but you'd still fall in lines with the required code. Of course, there's a cost of my neighbors having to feed their chickens. They eat between half and 1 cup of feed per day, and then they need other grit and oyster shells and vitamins and electrolytes and dusting powder and toys, etc., that are no more expensive than my poor dog who's spoiled rotten. Ask yourself, will any of this affect me or you as a neighbor? My answer to that is no more than the occasional loose dog or those families who let their cats pee on my patio furniture because they don't keep them indoors at night. Yes, chicken can get lice and mites, not to mention intestinal worms and other icky parasites. They dust bath themselves regularly, so keeping parasites in check for themselves. Logically speaking, will those bugs travel across my yard to any other or through any other animal that may pick them up? No. No more than my kids do from summer camp or school. I see many pluses to this entire request. Chickens are great for bug control. They love to dig around for little bugs, and they are pretty adept at catching them midair as well, therefore reducing the mosquitoes. Chickens are also really good mousers, too. As a matter of fact, my friend told me that her hens are better at catching and killing mice than her cats are. They store their food. When you store their food, as long as it's in a covered container, there's really no reason to attract any more rodents than like the normal bird feeder that my neighbor has. The source of eggs, that goes without saying that having your own chickens will provide a quick source of eggs. Depending on the breed you get anywhere from 250 to 350 eggs per hen per year, which is awesome as far as that educational experience for everybody around, and we all get to have fresh eggs. The smell of waste, I did buy bags of chicken coop. You can buy them at your local store for fertilizing my yard. Basically, it is much safer than what Monsanto provides us, and no one noticed from the neighbor side a thing in my yard, including those 3 forgotten bags in my shed that I didn't understand what that smell was from about 4 years later. In summary, I think that this is something that really should be considered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that about wraps up the signatures on the sign-in sheet. Is there further discussion on this?
I just want to then have clarification from council based off of all of the feedback that we had on some of the changes that we'll likely make to the ordinance that we have proposed, the draft ordinance that we have before us. Or is this something then that we would do at a later date?
I think my recommendation is that we actually try to narrow this down one way or another in your straw votes, so then we can create, if it passes. Obviously, the first straw vote is if we're continuing, but then narrowing this down, because what I have in my notes is that we're taking new ordinance proposal and old ordinance proposal and sort of merging, but for me, I just need clarification on which merge it is. So that would be my recommendation, is that we go through some of the straw votes so we are clarifying, so if we bring it back, it's clean.
Okay.
So the question becomes, is there a specific straw vote or a specific model that you'd like to lead with first for the vote?
Right. So originally I had asked council if we wanted to go through option 1 or option 2, where option 1 was very little guidance whatsoever. It just took away the prohibition of chickens. It sounds like based off of our discussions that is not where we'll be going. So I would like to amend the straw vote to be whether or not we pursue with option 2, and then make adjustments based off of our discussions today.
Okay, so having that said, can I see a quick show of hands for the council to pursue option 2 on a straw vote? All
Mr.
those.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question before we do the vote? So option, I just want to make sure I'm getting all these options correct. So option 2 is basically just changing the wording there regarding the foul and that stuff, or is it all of Exhibit A?
May I clarify?
Yes.
So option 1, the only thing that was changed was Chapter 14, Article 1, Section 14.2, and it was just the words. So if you see on page 6.
So that was option 1.
Yeah, so scroll down to 2, and it's just changing the fact that chickens were banned. Okay. And it just says that's not true anymore. You can have chickens up to 6, and then roosters are here. So that doesn't include any guidance with regards to where you can put your coop or anything like that. That's option 1. So based off of discussion, let's scrap option 1, and then look at option 2, which says we will be changing the language as in option 1, so that gets rid of the language that says that chickens are prohibited. And then it includes this additional ordinance that you see in Exhibit A. But then I am adding at this point for the purpose of our straw vote to pursue option 2, which is this Exhibit A ordinance, but including all of the discussion items that we discussed here today, which included perhaps changing the lot line to at least 10 feet to make it consistent with sheds. And we were also discussing perhaps removing the coop after 3 or 6 months of
non-use or something like that.
So those types of considerations, so that we would pursue with that route to pursue an ordinance as opposed to just changing the current ordinance that we have.
Okay, because I was looking at it and I'm liking a lot of what I see in option B.
Oh, in Exhibit B.
Exhibit B versus Exhibit A. I'm not opposed to option 2.
Right.
It's just.
So then the straw vote going forward, and please let me know if any of the other council members are confused. The straw vote going forward is that we will table this and return with is that correct? Yeah, we will table this and then return with an amended ordinance that combines the discussion items we had today with the items in Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and then we will return if we want to then go forward with that.
So having said all that, can I have a quick show of hands for those in favor? Those opposed? So it looks like it's unanimously in favor.
I'm opposed.
Or opposed, I'm sorry. One opposed. And we will go ahead and pursue making the changes and updates and including the notes that you had captured.
Right, and some of the other items that were talked about in the permit/license, but we'll add A and B, and we'll work on that and some of the clarifications.
Alderman Diaz.
Yes, will this come back to another COW meeting so we can have further discussion?
I believe
That would be
Yes.
the idea.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, we will now go back into sequential order, chronologically beginning with the Emergency Operations Management Training for Elected Officials.
So, Mayor, I'd like to postpone that one, obviously, due to the time, and I told the fire chief he could go home because he was not feeling well.
Okay.
So I would like to postpone that one. We'll come back in August on that one.
We could call order the day and bring him back here.
He's really not feeling well.
All right, so moving on to then item 2, city website.
Obviously, I'm waiting for IT coordinator Justin Chapetta to come out here. He's going to do this presentation. I do want to mention before he starts the presentation, obviously, this is one of his last days here at the city of Rolling Meadows. He will be going to another municipality. We do have a search, and we do appreciate and really thank him for 5 years at the city of Rolling Meadows. We know how to get in touch with him anyway. But at the same point in time, we do appreciate all that he's done. Obviously, we're in the middle of an ERP. It might be delayed a little bit when we get the new coordinator in place because he's been so involved in that. But at the same point in time, obviously, what we're doing tonight is just going over the city website as it exists today. We just wanted to make sure that people knew what's on there now before it goes through revamping. But also, during the most recent election, many people just didn't know about part of our portal, and we felt that it was very important. We do know that, obviously, with the Economic Development Committee, we did show parts of this. So, Alderman Diaz, just you're only getting part of it. There's a little bit different than what we were doing last time, but we think it's very informative that everybody really knows what's on our site. So, we're not going through everything, but with that, I do turn it over to Justin.
Thank you. I'll try to make this brief. I know it's late. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the homepage really quickly and just cover a few items here. So under the government drop-down, you can see here we have a lot of the items that deal directly with our city government. Agendas and minutes are a popular one. City council pages are here. Department pages are also under this drop-down. Our transparency portal, which gives the finances and a lot of documents that are a lot of municipalities and cities they put up there for the transparency purposes. Rolling Meadows Broadcasting Network, we have a live feed where you can watch these meetings online. We also have an on-demand archive, which we update with all the newest videos. And lastly, we have an emergency management page. Moving on to services drop-down, this has all the services that we offer for residents and businesses alike. And there are plenty of different. You can go down and there's lots of them here. Moving on to our community, this is more for residents and people who are wanting to learn more about the city itself. Community overviews, monthly city newsletters. So there's a lot of information here, and for new residents coming in, there's a page specifically for them to go over utilities and things of that nature. The business drop down. This is where bids and requests for proposals are. Another very popular link on our website. Business resources, dining guide, licenses and permits, and so on. The How Do I page is also another heavily used portion of the website. A lot of the questions that are asked through phone calls and emails usually can be found in this portion of the site. A lot of information here, and this page is nice because we don't clutter up our home page with a lot of stuff, and this does give a lot of information in a very short amount of time. Citizen requests. Citizens can create an account and log in and put in requests for potholes or just general questions. Each department's on there, so there's a lot of different methods to submit your request. So any concerns or any kind of resident issues, you can definitely go through that. It's checked on a daily basis. Online payments, the most popular portion of our website, actually. You can pay for your utility bills and any other city-related items. As I mentioned before, the government transparency, financial and budget information. There's also another portion here if residents want to stay notified with items that are going on in the city. Areas of the website do have a checkbox once you sign up, so you can receive an email or a notification, text notification, if we post a job or there's a new update to a portion of the website, they get notified. Moving on to the Rolling Meadows calendar, we have all of our events for the current month on this page. Everything from city council meetings to board meetings and community events. For all other events, there's this button down here. You can view the whole year's worth of events and also an archive. Under Rolling Meadows News, we usually put the most prominent happenings in the city, community events, or just items that really need to be on the front page for a limited amount of time. We put them up here. Quick links. Statistically, the most popular links on our site, the agendas and minutes portion. I'll go in here really quick and kind of give an overview of this section. So as you can see here, you can get your minutes from past meetings. You can watch the videos from past meetings. You can also download the packets as well. And this is for all city meetings, not just for city council and committee of the whole. We have boards and economic development, plan commission, and so on. And you'll see up in the corner here, there's an archive of past meetings as well. So there's a lot of information in this part of the page or website. All right. Yep. I'm moving on to construction projects. This is fairly new. The Public Works Department has been working with the GIS specialists to put this together. Very nice. It gives you a lot of information. If you scroll down to specific projects, it does zoom in and kind of lets you know where it is and gives you some information about it. If you click this link here for more information, it'll take you to another section of our website where there's updates on the projects. All right. Freedom of Information requests. Let's see here. The Rolling Meadows Broadcasting Network. I'll go in here really quick. We broadcast on Wide Open West and Comcast Channel 6. We have a live feed and also an on-demand archive. So we go in here. As you can see, we do have council meetings, committee of the whole meetings, community events, and some other items that you can view on demand. Lastly, we're going to go through Community Portal. This is also in coordination with the GIS coordinator. Let's see. So Community Portal, if you type in your address, it gives you a lot of information that residents might find helpful. So it gives you information about your property, who your government representatives are, zoning information, and property tax breakdown. So there's a lot of information in this section, specifically about your address. And in closing, we are looking forward to a website refresh in the year 2020. It's slated to every 5 years with the company we're with, Civic Plus. They do offer a web page refresh and redesign. So that is on the docket for 2020. Does anyone have any questions about the website?
No, just a comment. I think it's very good. Rob showed me a good portion of it there when I was concerned about a project that's there. It makes it very. If you know where you're going on there, it makes it very visible for people to see everything from upcoming events to what's going on with my street. Is it on that type of stuff. As we go through new things, I'll bring you some suggestions of things that aren't there, but I think it's great.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yep.
Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll move this right along to the next line item, which is number 4, feeding wild animals. Alderman Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an issue that came to light a few months ago. There's a person that lives in my ward that has been feeding the animals large quantities of food in buckets and in bags, leaving the product out next to Kennedy Pond, if people know where that's at, off of Hartung. And it's really become problematic out in that area because they're leaving lots of droppings behind and things of that nature, to a point where it's really, it could become really a major problem. Some of the concerned citizens around here have actually gone over there and cleaned up on a regular basis to try to mitigate the problem. The one person that's doing this does not seem to be cooperative. The residents of the condo complex that the person lives in has sent a letter asking the person to stop, but that hasn't worked. Our police department has stopped by and asked the person to stop. That hasn't worked. So with the help of our police chief, he showed me an ordinance that we have included in here that came from the city of Elk Grove Village that might help us stop this problem. This current problem is not actually on our property. It's not actually on the city of Palatine Park District's property. It's actually on the HOA's property. So it's really on theirs. They're the ones that need to address the issue also. I did have a conversation with a person in Palatine Park District. They don't really have a strict policy on this. They have signs up in many areas saying, please don't feed the animals, especially the wild animals. I think most of us, even if you're not a big animal lover, understand that that's really not a smart thing to do with wild animals, to feed them, especially buckets of their favorite things. So I'm asking that we would consider adopting this ordinance so we have some ability to stop this person from doing it. Short of that, I'm not really sure how we can stop the person from doing it. I normally don't like to bring things up that is just really geared towards a small part of our society, but I don't know what choice we have. So I've asked a couple of people, they feel the same thing. We don't know what our other options would be. So that is my suggestion going forward, that we adopt the ordinance similar to what Elk Grove Village has. If people have other better suggestions, I'm all ears. So thank you for listening.
Any follow-up or any questions for clarification for Alderman Cannon? Seeing none, then the question is a quick show of hands to see if we move this ordinance as drafted from Elk Grove up to the council level for vote adoption at the council level. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So currently, as it reads from the Elk Grove perspective, this ordinance is sufficient as it stands now for council to make a vote on should it come up to the council dais. Okay. Then with that, can I get a quick show of hands to move this ordinance as written from Elk Grove Village up to the council level for a vote and adoption of the ordinance? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Moving on from line item 4 on to line item 6, the basics of Robert's Rules Parliamentary Procedure Overview. Manager Crumstock.
Thank you. No, I'm not going to cancel this one. I will make it very brief, and I actually gave you a handout, so when I don't go through a slide, at least you have it in front of you. Obviously, we have different discussions about Robert's Rules of Order, but obviously we just wanted to do a quick overview on it, and hopefully my clicker still works. It's been off. But the purpose of really Robert's Rules is really making meetings fair, and it allows anybody to have a voice, and it gives structure to any kind of meeting. So there's not my right or our rights. There's always how are you going to be putting with the majority, with the minority, some of the other pieces that are out there. There are really 10 basic principles of Robert's Rules, and it's actually pretty easy to understand. And what I want to mention on that is that it's really trying to keep everybody equal. And what I mention on that is, again, these are just the main ones. Some people would say that there's 11 or 12, but really when you talk about Robert's Rules, it's really 10 basic principles that you talk about. But also they do talk about the duties of the chair. Obviously, the mayor has opportunities to deal with certain things, and Robert's Rules also is trying to keep things fair in the duties and how you keep the meeting flowing and all those other kind of pieces. The other thing is just even with the duties, it's also making sure that obviously things are tactful, fair, being incorporated the same way. So even if you have a mayor pro tem, that it's keeping everything fair and equitable to everybody else. Obviously, with agendas, in Robert's Rules, they do have set up of what agendas need and what they should have. And obviously, in our Code of Ordinances, we also talk about what is actually should be in an agenda. If there is a Code of Ordinance for the City of Rolling Meadows that is in conflict with Robert's Rules of Order, the Code of Ordinance for the City of Rolling Meadows actually takes precedent. And I'll have one example of that later on. But it's very important for people to understand that obviously any kind of meeting, you still need a call of order, a roll call, quorum, minutes, going through any of the consent agendas, reports, and boards. Some people have special items. We don't. We have a consent agenda, and then we do move on. Public comment in Robert's Rules of Order does talk about that it should be in the meeting near the end. Typically, in our Code of Ordinance, we actually talk about that it's near the beginning of the meeting. So again, different things. Going back to what recently came up, and again, this goes back into motions. A motion is called to action to do something, yay, nay, whatever you want to call it. But again, a subject is introduced by a member who makes a motion. Typically, it's beginning, I move. So typically, others around the room have heard that there's main motions. A main motion requires a second for consideration. If there's no second, the motion dies of lack of second. So around the room, as Alderman Cannon and Alderman Diastis will remember, every time that we had prevailing wage, it would get a motion and then would die. So again, it does need to. Obviously, with the state changing that, now we don't even have to bring prevailing wage up to that. The second is really important. It starts really the discussion. It does have its own pieces and everything. It's good to know the second, and I do appreciate Mayor Gell making sure that you do use that for Judy and I, that we know who the second is. Obviously, sometimes we're shaking heads and making sure who actually had it and looking around who actually had the hand up. But it is important, and it does have its own precedent, and it does need to be on the floor. There's obviously etiquette that Robert Rules does talk about. The maker of the motion has the right to speak first, and obviously there is some limits on some of the discussion. And again, the city code does deal with part of this, and how many times you can have what's been called the bite at the apple. And again, that all goes back into Robert's Rules talks about one thing, our city code actually talks about some of the other pieces. It's also the duty of the chair to ensure that discussion is orderly and relevant. But again, it's all talking about Robert's Rules, and it's a big book, other than if you get the Robert's Rules for Dummies, which is a little bit smaller. And I do have that book too now. But it's very important that we continue, and we always talk about people signaling your intentions. There's a lot of things in there about motions and other things that really don't come up, and I'm sure that there are certain people who are Toastmasters. You ask them a question, they're also going to say, well, I don't remember that, but I know it's in Robert's Rules. So again, it's all part of what we talk about. Yeas and nays, and again, that is part of the calling the question. In our Code of Ordinance, it does say that everybody has to vote, so you can't really be silent on something. Amendments, and many of you are used to this, a motion to amend some of the other pieces that are out there. I'm going really briefly, just keeping things flowing because I gave you all this, but there's ideas in how you can actually do an amendment, if you're actually striking words, if you're inserting words, if you're actually talking about a new part, or if you're adding in a friendly amendment. Friendly amendments typically are done by Springfield and Congress. I've been here since 99 and I've never seen a friendly amendment, but it's all part of rules and right. Obviously, the amendments, you do need to vote on them. If they fail, then the original ordinance or resolution is actually postponed. Deferment. Typically, how this starts is a motion to defer to a specific date. Council meeting really should be. It does need a second. It is debatable, and then you can amend it later on. Division of a question. This is one that we haven't used in a long time, but we do talk about it. Allows a longer or complicated motion to be split into two or more parts. It does need the second again. Once approved, the motion must be handled as two separate main motions and be handled in sequence. Typically, what we try doing here is that we do small amendments, but if someone really wanted to really make it, they would do a division. Again, as I said, in Robert's Rules, they do talk about limiting debate. We do have limits on required, how you actually get to that point. Various limits are actually talked about, and how many times you can actually talk, and if you call a question, and all those kind of things. Regarding calling a question, the purpose of calling a question is really to end the debate. It's calling for a vote. Typically, the wording that is going to be used is call a question or I move to the previous question. It needs to be done orderly, and it does need to be done where you're respectful for all folks. It does end debate. So please, if you are going to call a question, as even Robert's Rules talks about, it should allow a reasonable amount of time for discussion before this motion is actually called. Points of order, there are different kinds in there, but again, what we do mention is that it is call the attention for the chair for a breach of parliamentary procedures. It can also be used by the chair to make a discussion that conflict or make a decision that conflicts with Robert's Rules of Orders. Regarding points of order, if you have a disagreement, it goes back to the chair, and the chair is the final decision. Obviously, you can always ask later or investigate if you didn't give us the headache at that point. Point of order, it's request of information or clarification to make a decision or another motion. Typically, a point of order would be asked to the chair or to staff to clarify something. Motion to withdraw, you've all seen that before. There's a person makes an amendment and then they ask for a motion to withdraw that motion. It does need a second, and it belongs to the group once that second is done there, but it does need a vote and all those things. Motion to reconsider needs a second. It is debatable, can be moved at any point. Typically, you're going to be using that for additional points, and I actually went kind of quick on that one. But you can be moved in second for someone on the prevailing side. And again, that could be on the positive side or the second side. This is one of those that I mentioned. Our Code of Ordinance is different from Robert's Rules. If you're doing a motion to reconsider from our code, it's actually the first and the second have to be from that prevailing side. And Robert's Rules is actually just the first. The second can be from either side. So again, our code is more strict, and it does talk about if you're going to do a motion to reconsider. And again, it's that prevailing side that actually typically does that. Adjourning, and once you make that motion in the second, it's non-debatable. And I've never ever seen adjournment debated. Most people just want to leave, and that's why I'm trying to keep this going. Obviously, there's some other things that you should be aware of. Motions that bring a question again before the assembly, obviously it does take to be tabled or brought back, rescinded. There are different kinds of motions in Robert's rules. There are 5 main classes: the main, subsidiary, privileged, incidental, and obviously bring a matter again to the assembly. Main motion, that's what you're all typically comfortable with. That's the one that you see all the time. Does need a majority vote. Subsidiary motion, and again, it's ranked higher than a main motion. If you're a Toastmaster, you would understand that one, but again, most of it is just how you deal with what you're calling for. So typically in this kind of motion, you're going to be postponing, amending, referring, and again, these are the main ones that are out there. Privilege motion, that's really allowing regular business. And again, what do you have to do with each of these pieces? Incidental motions, this is a division of the question that we mentioned a little bit before, point of order. Suspending the rules, the council can actually suspend their own rules for that meeting, but I've never seen that since '99. But it is in Robert's Rules, and it does talk about what you would actually do. Requests and inquiries, that is part of the point. It is not debatable in order to proceed, and you just move. So keeping things really quickly, as I said, that's why I gave this out. Robert's Rules is really, it's a great guide. It's complex. The book that we do have is about this big, but it's a little smaller. Obviously, there are all different kinds of flashbacks. There's other kind of things. But when Robert's Rules was actually created, and again, it goes back into what you saw in the write-up. You're talking about in 1876, a U.S. Army officer, Henry Martin Roberts, he did retire from the Army as a general. He really wanted to make sure that people had order, structure, and actually he made something overall that was supposed to be user-friendly, concise, organized, and a simple guide to cover the basics of rules. And we're on the 11th edition. I say we, but this is just one more thing. And what I do remind people is that it's the more you use it, the more practice you have, the more efficient it becomes. But at the same point in time, practice makes perfect. But at the same point in time, like we always try telling people, signal your intentions, and as long as the flow is working and the chair is actually able to not get surprised with council, you really don't have a lot of this. But we felt, even though we did touch base on Robert's Rules on a basic, we felt that it was also important just to go over some of the stuff and give you more information to read. The last comment that I would actually say before we actually turn that one off is that a reminder is, while Robert's Rules doesn't really talk about it per se, Opens Meetings Act. I know that all of you, we've been harping, obviously you do need to do your Open Meetings Act training. You need to get that certificate to Judy and I. If you think that you've done it in the past, it should be very easy to open it and not. Typically, it could take a half an hour to an hour to complete, but again, it just goes with some of the transparency, and it goes back to just like Open Meetings Act and Robert's Rules. It's just how the flow works that everybody is educated on some of the other pieces. So with that, I do leave you with that really quick overview, as I said, but I'm also reminding people, if you did not have that done, please refer back to the bottom of the sheet where we do that link again. So that is Robert's Rules in very basic, very quickly.
Yeah, thank you for the expeditious tutorial with that. And if there aren't any further clarification questions, I'd like to move on. Are there any clarification questions required here? No? Seeing none, then we'll move on to line item 7, space needs. Director Horn, come on down.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm assuming the PowerPoint will get put up shortly, and I promise I will be brief. As City Council may be aware, as part of the 2019 budget, there were funds approved for space improvements both at City Hall and the Public Works building on Birdnick Street. So what I'm just going to do here is run through a couple little facts, show you a little bit of the hurdles we deal with daily, and then Mr. Wenzel will come up and talk to you a little bit about Fire Station 16 and what we've proposed in the memo. We'll then take some of your questions and ask a few questions at the end to get some direction from City Council. The first item that we're talking about is the City Hall. As you all know, the building was constructed in the early 60s, has gone through several renditions of renovations and or additions and attempted improvements. However, it's my understanding that most of the interior improvements that were not structural in nature were designed, laid out, constructed all by in-house people. So really not by a professional in the industry. Just to give you an idea, this is the finance department. We did meet with a design professional before we started this just to get some facts and figures. And one of the figures they pointed out to us is that generally in a government use, you typically plan for 375 to 400 square feet per person, which also includes filing space, storage space, those kind of things. And finance is pretty close, just under that. However, as the pictures show you, many of the areas are kind of makeshift storage areas that were put in rooms that we didn't know what to do with. The center workspace area was just laid out with the cubicles with no real planning put into that area. The other point of importance that we're going to bring up throughout this presentation is employee safety. I'm not going to go too in the weeds on it. If you have more questions regarding this, you can ask Chief Nowacki. But active shooter matters are extremely important nowadays in our society, and especially in a government agency. As you all know, any school you go in has been almost a decade that they've been redoing their way of getting into a building. Almost none of our building has been, what's it called? Hardened. It's called hardened for those kind of matters. I'll move on to community development. Again, some of the same issues that we saw in finance, but even more so. There's only currently about 110 square feet of office space per employee. There's, I think, 10 employees in that small space. Again, all the clerical positions are really crammed up right at the front desk, which is not ideal either from an efficiency standpoint or from a safety standpoint. Moving on to the administrative areas, again, I hate to keep calling it makeshift. We're making do with what we have, right? So there were vacant offices or small closets that are now being jammed full of special events materials, community events materials, and really it's just we're growing out of those areas. So we don't have a real dedicated area for storage of these kind of materials in the administration area. And really the administration area is pretty much the entire second floor that's being discussed in this slide. The council chambers, as you all know, you come here almost every Tuesday night. It really does not reflect the kind of professional environment that we're trying to create here, that the city council and staff is trying to relay to the business community and to the residents. Additionally, I would have to defer to the police chief, but there are a number of real concerns regarding safety in this area specifically, as far as our inability to protect the public in the event that something were to happen during a council meeting. The next slide is the Public Works Building. This is incorporated because, again, it was a separate line item in the 2019 budget. All the same issues exist. I'm sorry. I was the one who screwed this slide up, so it's going really slow, so bear with me. But all the circles that you will see by the end of this long, drawn-out slide indicate files that are stored in a location that should be centrally located for our clerical staff to be able to access. We actually are storing files out in our bay where we park our dump trucks because nothing has been done kind of comprehensively with long-term needs in being considered. So again, that's why that slide was shown, really just to show all the different locations that we are trying to store files and records. The next one I'm going to let Don take over, talking about Public Works Facility and the Fire Station 16 location. Before I go, just a few items, major issues that were brought up by city employees, which you all have as part of the memos, but they include centralized filing, efficient use of space, more effective work areas, more storage and location for long-term filing, more emphasis on employee safety, maximizing the use, maximizing unused space, and planning space, the planning of the space by a design professional. So I will step aside and let Don finish up.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council, and thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Public Works facility on Central Road. We moved into our building 22 years ago into the Burdick Street facility. At that time, several of the areas of the old Public Works facility on Central Road that were offices, the walls were removed to create some filing area. The building, I know many people don't realize that building is packed, and it's being used by a number of different, almost every department in the city. The police department has got evidence storage down there. They have evidence that they have to keep for lifetime. They've got their communication vehicle down there, their incident command. Every department has got dead storage, and including Public Works. I didn't include any pictures of the equipment, but that building was identified to when we moved out of it. There was an investment to be made in it to maintain the building for 5 to 10 years. An investment that was never made in 2009. I believe we started the discussion on the condition of that building. Alderman Cannon was a great proponent for getting something done down there. The brick is falling off and so on. And something's got to be done with the building, and whatever is chosen, we're going to have to find a place for everything that's in that building. What we are asking this evening, or what we're including in our discussion with you this evening, because we know the next item is city property, is when Station 16 is vacated by the fire department, they move into their new building. We have proposed some short-term and long-term uses of that building. I've included a schematic of the floor plan here that shows, taking the sleeping rooms and converting them into storage for each one of the departments. converting the battalion chief and the lieutenant's office into secured police storage, that they can have a secure corridor with cameras so that they can monitor who's going and coming. The police department currently has not only with their command van, but other vehicles that don't have storage, places for storage. They also have one of the bays of their garage that's dedicated to their record storage, which we didn't include in here, but did have in the report. So we're suggesting that the City Council consider, until a decision is made on what we're going to do with the Central Road Public Works facility, that once the fire department vacates that building, that we repurpose the building, again, whether it be short-term, long-term. We own the building. We don't pay, under our franchise agreement, we don't pay for electricity. So all we would have would be water and heat, and being that it would be used for storage, those uses would be minimal. So with that, we'll take questions or comments and ask for direction on how we should proceed.
Manager Comstock.
I would just make one additional comment that a lot of the storage that we have is obviously record retention. Some stuff is 1 year, some stuff is 3, 7, and as you heard, for police evidence, sometimes it's forever. So it's typically annually we do go through what can we dispose of, then you have to send it back down to the state. They give you permission to dispose of, and then we do go through that. Technically, it's supposed to be in a tempered control area, so if we ever have to environment, if you have not gone to Public Works on Central Road, where we store a lot now, is not, and some of you have heard in the past when we go over there, it might not be in the best shape. It is definitely dirty, but we are trying to get ourselves right, and again, that's why we're bringing this whole piece together. We are trying to bring everything together. We do think that Fire Station 16 would be great for us to really deal with some of our other items that we have.
Thank you. Is there any questions or clarifications from the presentation this time? Alderman Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Wenzel, I just want to compliment you for all your work you've done on this. I know you've been doing this for years now. I think our old Public Works building is really an embarrassment for our city. We've been talking about this. I've only been on the council for 8.5 years, or a little bit less than 8.5 years, and the building's falling apart. We share it with our friends at the Park District. I guess going forward, I would suggest strongly that we either consider divorce from the Park District in this particular facility, or merge with them somehow and make them part of the city. Just a suggestion. For us to put more money in that building, to me, is just like throwing money out the window, but that's an opinion. But I mean, anybody who's physically been in that building understands that it was built in sections. The sections don't really meld together. The fact that we have critical police evidence in there, I would think that if a police agency came in and looked at that, we would be chastised at minimum. So I would strongly suggest, if we're going to hire someone, that we have a new plan for a brand new building somewhere, whether it's there. Ask the Park District to make a decision to either get their own facility. I know in the past people have expressed to me that we could move all of our equipment into the main Birdnick facility if Park District wasn't there. That seems like a reasonable situation to me. I know the things that I'm saying are probably offensive to some people. I don't mean them that way. But I think we've been messing around with old Public Works for really a long time, and it was before my 8 years. And we just need to do something. But we just can't keep on putting a couple $100,000 here and there, because the building's literally falling apart, and it's not a very well-functioning building. So relative to taking over 616, I feel strongly that 16 is a viable retail space for someone down the line. So I would not look at that as a long-term solution. That's just, again, an opinion. I would strongly suggest, we're going to have another discussion on 8, so we can talk about that a little down there. But at best, I would recommend that to be a short-term thing, and to get a more professional facility that's designed for storage, because we have storage needs all over the place. So I would suggest we go for a storage-only building somewhere, whether we need to build it new or buy an existing building and retrofit it. I think that would be the most logical thing and get plenty of space because we need it, obviously. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alderman Cannon.
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Sunoika.
Question for staff or for clarification. For requested council direction number 2 on page 16 of our packet, has there been any other additional searches for where to place our documentation after the short-term use of Fire Station 16 is into its long-term use?
So one of the points I tried to make in the report was to let the council know that staff has been working on alternative solutions to all these matters. But it's going to take a while to be able to present and formulate a plan that makes sense for the city council to choose a direction. And we just didn't want to get to that point and have to kind of force a decision to be made at a time when the fire station was vacant and a decision needed to be made. Right now, our big our ask, if you will, is short term. Let's just slow down and not do anything too soon until we decide, till we've been able to present something to City Council.
With that facility, but we still need to do a space needs.
Yeah, the needs.
Right.
Yeah, that's on item 2 only. So yes.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, it was just similar to Alderman Cannon's. It's kind of like looking at a 12-month plan. Once the fire department did vacate, potentially by the end of this year, could it be like a 12-month plan versus moving something twice? Move it from there to the old 16 and someplace else too. But it sounds like the short-term approach is what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and depending upon what's done and what the decision is.
Sure.
If it's a decision to knock down, if it's a decision to knock down the building and rebuild, I mean, we're looking at more than 12 months.
Sure.
But we are trying to formulate a plan because we do have the storage needs, and being that building is going to that they are going to be vacating that building.
Just one question. I haven't been on the council that long, so I'm just curious on this one. The Public Works building on Central Road. I've heard there's really not a whole lot we can do with that due to various laws and things regarding wetlands and things like that. Is it possible to knock down that building and use the same...
Let me take a stab at it. Yeah. So I would want an engineer to survey the site before I said anything definitively, but there is a floodplain on the property. However, a good portion of the property is still buildable, I believe. You would just have to lay out the site in such a way that the building footprint was outside the floodplain and the parking area and storage area could be in the floodplain. But again, that's a decision moving forward. There are a variety of options, and we're happy to hear any options the City Council has. We have, as staff, a few options that we want to propose. Again, all probably viable. It's just a matter of cost and whether it makes sense to the council.
Alderman Budmans.
Just for purpose of conversation, the firehouse is costing us about $375 a square foot to build, and the average storage facility is about $50 per square foot for secured storage. So we're spending, by moving storage into a firehouse, we're spending about 8 times to 9 times what people would normally spend to store their. So I understand it's a short-term solution, but as a long-term solution, it's probably pretty poor.
Well, if I may, we aren't just looking at record storage. And again, I apologize for not including the photographs, but the Central Road facility, and we invite you all to come down and take a look at it. The Central Road facility is full. We have our forestry department, or forestry runs out of there. We have all of our off-season equipment storage, such as our trackless units are down there. The equipment that gets used, frequently, or not frequently, the compressor, the generators, trailers. The building is full, and the Park District has got a third of it just for their operations, their daily operations. Then they have the outside rooms, which they have for youth baseball, youth football, and special recreation. But I'm telling you, that building is full, and it's not just record storage. If it was just record storage, certainly there's companies out there that you can pay to store your records, and when you need something, you call them up and you tell them what you need, and maybe 5 days later you'll get it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking that the building itself is fully used, even beyond its capacity of what it should be. And the condition of it is, we presented a report to City Council in 2009. We had a structural analysis done of the building and presented that to City Council, and at that time we needed $650,000 in repairs just to keep the building going for 5 years. And we spent not a penny on that. So this is something that our operations requires certain equipment. It's not equipment that you could readily go out and rent and get it when you need it in the middle of the night. The police department's got equipment there. The records are there. So there's a number of things there. And again, we invite you to come and take a tour. We'll be happy to walk you through that building and our building and show you what our obstacles are.
Thank you.
I do want to mention one more thing. At the Public Works building on Central Road, obviously what Don mentioned is obviously the city's there and the Park District is there. They have their third. There's also a very small part, but the museum actually stores there too. So we do have another unit, and we do have sometimes some outside agencies who store vehicles and other items out of that building. I have to be very vague on who they are. They're friendly agencies. But again, it is still being used a lot in that building. But again, I would tell anybody to take a storage walk and see the room that you saw the pictures. But again, even in this building, some of the pictures that Don took, not just my office. That's why I told him don't take a picture of my office. But we're really maxed out. And even every time that we can have storage in an area, and we know some of it is seasonal because we buy stuff and then we use it. But again, we always make sure that our sprinkler heads are not covered, but we're really at to the max. And part of this whole discussion is also what can we do with hardening, but also part of it is looking at what question number one really deals with is asking for a design professional to really bring in and look at all of our pieces and look at it not just for a 5-year use, but really our long-term. And sometimes when we've done additions or remodelings in this building, it is for a period of 5 to 10 years. We're really looking down because we're, hitting the seams. And I would make the comment, Public Works building on Central Road, it's aged.
Alderman Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I would ask you was if we could get additional storage space in general relative to this building, if we get some of the things out of here, would that allow us to do some reconfiguring of this? Because obviously the implication here is that a lot of these spaces are too small. And understanding that, is there storage here that we could move out of here if we had a place to put it?
So I would say yes, but again, I really hesitate to answer any questions like that because we've noticed that, at least since I've been here, and Don has been experiencing it for many years. When we don't get design professionals involved, when we try and do it alone, we do it wrong. sometimes.
I'm not asking that, though. So what I'm
but I
asking-
don't know. I don't want to say that we can
Game space.
do that without the use. I mean, I might tell you we can remove all these things and open this area up, and you can't because it's a load-bearing wall, or there's a. We talked downstairs. We wanted to remove this wall that would open up this area for the inspection area, so we could, and we can't because it's all the pipe venting are in that wall. So, again, that's why I think it's so critical. This is a big, comprehensive issue, and I think it would be best if we brought you a comprehensive solution. And the only way we're going to do that is the assistance of a design professional.
And that's fine, I guess. But I guess the thing, you seem like you're insinuating that we're going to have to add some space to this building for people to fit in it. That's kind of what I'm reading behind the scenes.
I think I think personally, the way I see it is when we can get some of the, if we have the ability to get the off-site storage at the Station 16, it might free up space in this area. But again, if they reconfigure areas, we can maybe maximize space better than we do it now. Right now, we just have basically not store-bought, but basically cubicles that are bought from an office warehouse, and we just put them in a space. And that's not the proper way to design a workspace for long-term.
So the people you want to hire will be an architect is fine, but are they a space specialist?
That's typically what we do. We go for the professional services, that it would be space needs, and that's what they do.
Yeah, we would involve that, whatever architecture firm. And again, the assumption would be that we would be bringing that to the City Council for approval, and we will let you know what that proposal involved at the City Council
Thanks
level.
for the answers.
Yeah.
Alderman Diastis.
Thank you. I am opposed to using Station 16 for any kind of permanent storage. I almost don't like to use it for short-term storage. I think that is a prime piece of property that we should be able to sell and maximize our dollars. I think we should take a hard look at the land on Central Road and see how much is buildable. And we all know that old Public Works building needs to go. So assume you have to tear it down, how big a facility can you put there? I mean, that would make the most sense to me, unless you've got another parcel of property somewhere, and I'm not too interested in buying another parcel since we already got one. And I'd like to know what kind of cost we're talking about with these architect and space planners. I mean, it's good to say yes, but are we talking $10,000? Are we talking $100,000? What are we talking about, so that we can make some kind of a decision relative to the long-term use of the land that we own or we may have to buy?
If I can just say, I understand that, Alderman Diastis, and really that's, I think, why staff is coming to you today, because we did not want to go through all that process of talking to architects and negotiating and trying to come up with a proposal that if the council was adamantly against it altogether, we didn't want to go through that. So that's why I'm just looking, again, you'll have, the council will have an opportunity to approve or not approve it at the city council meeting. We just want to know if we should go through those steps to doing all that. It will take a lot of staff time to do that.
So with that, do you believe I can go ahead and ask the first question to council, whether or not staff should pursue the assistance of a design professional and bring them forward for proposal to the city council and assessing this? Can I see a quick show of hands for those in favor of that?
That's four.
Is there a budget attached to that?
I believe they were going to bring that at the city council at the time they visit city council.
Yes.
Okay, so that's unanimous. And then there is a part two, which is the city council agreeable at this time to discussion related to keeping Fire Station 16 as opposed until long-term solutions can be identified and addressed, required space needs, and the use of existing public works building on Central Road. So with this, again, a quick show of hands, seeing if we can go ahead and utilize this space for a temporary term. Those in favor?
And just for discussion, correct? I mean, it's just to continue future discussion. That's
As
all.
it's phrased here, yes,
Yeah.
it's discussion related
just
to
to
utilization.
talk. Sure.
Because I'd like to see.
Yes,
more.
that's how it reads.
Okay.
Okay, so
And
that's-
Mr. Mayor, one point on Station 16 I want to point out is that the cell tower that's on that building, we've got several leases that generate revenue on that. If we sell the site, we lose that revenue also.
Provide those numbers when you reevaluate the situation up
We
at the
will do
council dais.
Yes, we will do that.
Just one more thing, just so Alderman and Mayor, you know that we are doing an investigation on that property because from 1978 and 79, the school district and the city had conversations, and there's a deed, there's a whole bunch of other things that are in there, but if you read one of the old documents, we were supposed to maintain their property, and then we were supposed to maintain our property, and then it comes back into that there's another piece that's out there that says when it was turned over to us. So there's some additional information that we're getting because these documents, to the point that the city attorney went down to Cook County and they're missing a document. So we're still trying to make sure that we're clear and clean on that property.
Yeah, so let's remove the gray on that before we bring that forth. So at this point, we do have the count for the second question, which was 4, a show of hands, 4 in favor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So wrapping up our line items, the last one on the list, the 8th one, which is city property. Manager Crumstock.
I will try making this as short as possible. You have the 3 pieces of property that I've listed, and staff recommendation for really 4 items, but specifically the first one, does staff have the authority to get new appraisals conducted on the 3 properties that are before you? Obviously, the second one is for the property that we talk, all 3 of them. Can we get a broker on each property or one broker for all 3? And then does the city council want to see an appraisal before deciding on action regarding brokers? And then the third and final one is, does the city council still want any of the properties to stay in green space? But it's all 3 that we have listed for people at home. It's our property across the street from 2301 Algonquin Road. Back in 2012, we did an appraisal. Then we had another appraisal. Obviously, the city purchased some property to expand it when we were once talking about Station 17. We really had no bites on the apple. This is green space. It was actually turned over to the city at one point to make a connector road that was never created. It's right by a bank that is still up for sale. The next piece of property is obviously 3111 Meadow Drive, the Fire Station 15, the Fogarty Station that will be abandoned soon, so we have no idea how much that would be, so the appraisal is definitely necessary. And then obviously the third and final piece of property that we talk about over here is the property across the street from us. If it was light, I could point it out. It's the green space over there. We very nicely call it lot number 4. It's actually plotted as lot number 2 on the designs. It's obviously been kept. We haven't done an appraisal in a period of time. Obviously, 2017 was the last item that we had. That was supposed to be a carbon copy of building number 1 at the Riverwalk that never was done. The caveat with that one would be is that if the city council decides to actually sell that property, any proceeds from that sale have to go back into that TIF because that piece of property is in a TIF district. So with that, that's my very, very brief discussion on 3 and what we're looking for direction.
Okay, so with that, it appears we have 3 pieces of property and 4 questions. Do we want to take each question in the group of the 3 properties, or do you want to break it down? For example, does staff have authority to have appraisals conducted for each of the 3 properties, right? Or does the council want to go ahead and have staff provided authority to pursue one of those 3 or 2 of those 3? Do you want to take it in unanimity?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what I would like to see, this is again my opinion, I would like to see us develop an RFP for these 3 pieces of property plus Station 16 and put it out to local appraisers that have to be within 15 or 20 miles a year. I don't want some guy from the south side coming up and making appraisals.
So then a local broker.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be right here from Rolling Meadows, but I don't want a downtown guy. I'd like a guy who knows this area really well, because we don't want to have ambiguity. I just want to make sure that they know
the market.
what's going on in the market. And I'd like, even if we decided to keep 16 in-house, I think we all need to know a potential value of that property.
Yeah.
Okay. And then before we decide on any of these, just to reiterate the questions, the following question would be then, does the City Council want to see the appraisals before deciding on action regarding those broker of all three properties? So would you prefer the conversation occur with that local broker?
I think we can get the appraisals done on a pretty timely basis. I don't think it would take much more than a month or two, I can't believe. So yes, I would like to, after we get the appraisals, I'd like to consider brokers then.
So then we may have opportunity to consolidate these 4 questions into a single question that could combine the best of all here. So that would be giving staff the authority to have appraisals conducted by a local broker, and then providing the council with the feedback on that local property value. And then the 4th question was, does the City Council still want any of the properties to stay green? I guess that could be determined depending on the valuation of those parcels of property.
Yeah.
I think we should sell them all if you're asking a question.
I'm just asking, what's the determinant factor for green space versus sell it? Just because it's got $1 attached to it, sell it?
I don't think it should be green space, but that's just an opinion.
Mr. And this might be for city. I have a ballpark idea of what a residential appraisal costs. Do we have ballpark? I mean, to Mayor Gallo's point, if we do it all in one, we might be able to get, hey, you're going to do 3 appraisals for us, so I'd give us a break versus doing 3 individual appraisals if we go with an RFP approach. Is there a ballpark idea what it takes? Because I saw in here all the past appraised values, but what it costs for an appraisal on commercial spots?
So typically it's been between $10,000 and depending on how quickly we ask for it. We once asked for it to be turned around in 2 weeks, and that was about $16,000. Per lot. So again, it all depends on who we get in there and who we actually get them in the timetable.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Diaz.
Thank you. Can we do an RFP out to brokers and find out, say, we've got 3 properties.
What's your bet?
We want it done within
60 days.
60 days. Submit your RFP of what you're going to charge, and let them bid for it. I mean, no reason why we can't. And the only, I agree with Mr. Cannon that we should sell all of them. However, if we're not going to get any money out of the piece across the street, if it's all going to go
straight to the
TIF, we may want to reconsider that one.
So one of my suggestions going forward was we'll wait and see what the valuation of each property comes back at, because we don't know what kind of EPA is going to be required for Kirchhoff and Meadow Fire Station 16, and that could get very costly to the city if we have to do any reparation. So let's go ahead and, if I could, I would say that we would just pursue one question at this time, omitting the 4th point about green space, and just go out to bid for a local broker to get appraisals on the 3 properties in question. Straw votes for that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I suggested 4.
For
well, 16 also for appraisal.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so including 16, which is not on the documentation.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so if you want to make an addendum for Station 16 in that, and then if I can just see a quick show of hands for the straw vote for staff to pursue that. That's unanimous. Well, that's wonderful. So that brings us to a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Cannon made the first, Bud Metz, and everyone made the second. So let's go ahead and call this meeting adjourned.